sound like a bit of an old song because I've sung it so many times on this channel and in the introduction to countless other reviews. But every now and then, it's wonderful to come across a movie that reminds me why I love doing these reviews so much. I mean, outside of kind of the basic, it's my hobby, it's something I do to unwind, it's fun. Yeah, that's all great, and I love that. But sometimes you really do start to wonder, especially when you see how many YouTube film reviewers are out there. There are a lot of us. I mean, Shang-Chi came out, and like literally within hours there were dozens of reviews. Everybody had an opinion on this movie, good, bad, or indifferent. And yeah, you're gonna go see those. You kind of have to. But what I wanted to do when I started these was I wanted to make sure that I was casting light on the films that nobody was talking about. The films that got no distribution or very little distribution, that got no hype, that maybe you never even heard of until you were walking around and looking at the depressingly small DVD aisles now, and you see a little film on a shelf and you go, what's that? Never heard of it. Oh, look at that. It came out this year. Wonder what this is about. Now, granted, when you do this, you run the risks that you are going to pick up a real dud. I mean, you run the same risk when you go to every movie. Every movie you go to is a crapshoot. You don't know what it's going to roll up. You know, and sometimes when you do like I do, you pick up some of these no-name films and you understand why they have no name. I picked up another one along with this one that is so wretched, I don't even know if I'm going to finish watching it to review it. I don't know if it's even worth my time to trash. But every now and then you get something that is just very charming and very delightful and very lovely, and a film that just is calming, is like a nice cool breeze, and you say, oh, I'm really glad that I found this movie. And I know my voice doesn't carry a lot of weight, but maybe, just maybe, I might be able to turn some other folks onto this. The highest viewed video that I have that just reached 1,000 viewers, so thank you to everyone for that, was my review of The Spinning Man, a movie that nobody had heard of, and I was the only person in the theater to watch. But that's the one that people seem to be drawn to. So I kind of take it as a little bit of a personal point of pride that I find the movies that nobody else talks about, and we talk about them. And it's always a bonus when that film that you're going to talk about is actually good. And such is the case with this film. Unfortunately, generic title and all. So let's discuss this. So if you've never heard of this film, which I am going to bet money that you haven't, I don't know what happened to this, if it came out kind of during the summer, or if it just was one of those casualties of the pandemic, that it was scheduled for release and then they couldn't find a time or a theater for it, so they just said, screw it, dump it to DVD and streaming. I don't know. I don't know what the story is here, but I'm willing to bet that you've never heard of this film, even though apparently it's based on a best-selling book. Everything's based on a best-selling book. Yes, it is another one based on a YA young adult novel, which I have, in terms of reading, I have no real experience with. I've reviewed quite a few of them, and I have to say, despite my cynical nature, I have to say, I find it a little disconcerting how many of these young adult films I've actually enjoyed. I really enjoyed 5 Feet Apart, which was scary in how prolific it actually was going to turn out to be. I don't think we quite knew the foreshadowing that was sending to us at the time. Anyway, however, I digress. So, as this is a YA novel turned film, it means that one of the things we have to accept right on the face of it is we are dealing with a certain amount of stock plot, stock character, territory. It's just something that comes with the film. You're right? So, with that in mind, what is the story? So our main story focuses on Finley, a young girl who wishes to be a violin player and wants to go to a special conservatory. She bombs her first audition and decides that she needs some time away to rethink her life, and remembers that her brother, who we find out had passed away tragically a few years prior, had done an exchange program in Ireland for a semester, and she decides that that's what she's going to do. She's going to follow in his footsteps. On the plane ride over to Ireland, she just happens to sit next to a young heartthrob movie star who is flying over to Ireland to film the latest film in this series of vaguely Lord of the Rings / Game of Thrones with some Twilight sprinkled in. Apparently, they're supposed to be the big thing in this universe. So they sit next to each other. Of course, at first they don't like each other, or he likes her, but she doesn't like him because he's a cocky, pretty boy who, just isn't her type, and she's serious and studious and sweet to the core. And she goes to Ireland and learns to find her soul, to find her music. She finds an inspirational teacher in the supposedly, worthless, drunk, street violin performer who teaches her how to play with soul. She makes friends with a grumpy old lady at a retirement home whom everybody in the town thinks is the worst human being ever. But it turns out she's actually too nice, which is why everybody hated her, because she did something that was so nice in the past that, everybody just assumed it was a bad thing. And of course, this whole time she is striking up a romance with this young man who, of course, his life of film stardom and tabloid fodder is hard to navigate, and you never understand, how hard it is for these people. Very stock, as I've said, but now here's the thing. And I said this all in a very dismissive tone. I tend to do that. But I mentioned this with the 12 Mighty Orphans review, that paint by numbers is not a bad thing if the picture that you produce is still pretty to look at. So the question, again, as we asked with that film, we have to ask with this film is, given all of these stock plots and the very predictable nature of this type of movie, is the film still good? Does the picture it create, is it still pretty to look at? And the answer is yes. It's a deceptively charming little film. And it feels like they knew kind of the area they were in. They understood the situation they were in and the material that they were working with, and decided, we're not going to play it up. I find that a lot of films that know that they're working from a formulaic starting point tend to play up that fact. For instance, movies on sci-fi, SYFY, I hate that. Anyway, there for a while had this reputation of just how bad and corny they were, because of things like Sharknado. But that's because they realized that all the original movies they were trying to produce were so bad and horrible, and that was why people were tuning in to watch them. So they leaned really hard into the skid. And you can't convince me for a second that that is not the exact same thinking that goes on somewhere like the Hallmark Channel. Everybody likes to complain or, feels like they're the first person to point out that, Hallmark Christmas movies are rather formulaic. Well, that's like pointing out that Alice in Wonderland is a little weird. Everyone who says it thinks they're the first one to point it out, but there's a reason. They know the formula works, and they have gotten to a point where they're steering really hard into the skid and making them even more formulaic and really hanging a lampshade on the fact that they're so formulaic, which to me makes, in both instances, makes the films even a little bit more cringeworthy. But they know their audience. This film knows that it's formulaic. It knows it's paint by numbers and it's working with stock characters and a stock plot. But it decides not to turn into that skid. It decides instead to pull it back and let the entire movie have a very relaxed feel. They're not trying to hang a lampshade on anything. they are softening the edges of a lot of these characters. First of all, I think that this has to do with the location, because Ireland is just a very soft-edged kind of place in terms of filming. You know, all the rolling hills, the architecture is very round, you know, the music is very joyful. So there is a very comforting and a real, again, a soft edge to the whole place. So the location adds to that. But all the characters have a nice soft edge to them. They're nice to be around. They're good people, good characters, and none of their attributes are so sharp that you ever feel like they are in danger of alienation. For instance, okay, what do I mean by that? That's a lot of gibbering. Let's consolidate this down. So let's take our lead, our male lead, the character of Beckett, played by Jedediah Goodace. And first of all, congratulations to your parents for actually naming you Jedediah. I think that's awesome. But anyway, he has a difficult role, because the roles of the male leads in these YA novels all tend, again, to be very stock. They're a little bit of a bad boy. They got a bit of a hard edge. You know, they don't want the stuck-up prissy girl to, always be that way. She has to break out and learn to be free and learn to live life and blah, 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 blah. They can come off, if played wrong or written wrong, they can come off as very condescending, very snarky, very dismissive, very obnoxious, and not all that unlikable. I remember having that problem initially with the male lead in 5 Feet Apart, is that he just came off as, just kind of a dick. And it's like, why would you want to be with this person other than the fact that he's not bad to look at? But with this character, with the character of Beckett, I feel like they softened him just enough. This is a character that could come off, again, very abrasive, obnoxious, borderline creepy, if not played with a certain amount of grace and a smile and a soft edge to know that his advances and his things are not meant to be invasions or whatnot. They're charm, and when he notices that he's gone too far, he pulls it back. He's a character that you're like, okay, yeah, he's a little full of himself, but he's not a bad person. You can understand why our young heroine would fall in love with him. And speaking of that, let's talk about our young heroine, the character of Finley, played by Rose Reed. She's your typical YA heroine. She's beautiful, she's perfect, she loves studying, her heart is just so big, she always thinks of others first. And of course she's carrying around sadness because, there was tragedy in her past. I must give the film credit that it did not go in for the rather troubling trend of having one of its young protagonists have an incurable disease, like a lot of these ones tend to do. She has a dead brother, but, that's kind of beside the point. A character that, again, can come off a little bit to, I guess what this term would be, Mary Sue. I hope I'm using the term correctly, but that fan insert character, that this character is you. See how perfect you are, see how sweet you are, see how wonderful you are. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I want to stress that. I don't think there's anything wrong with characters like that. Everybody wants to see themselves in a character, but again, they run the risk sometimes of making the characters too perfect or too stuck up or too studious to the point where they're beyond the reach. They're too much. And I think they really hit a good balance for her. Yes, she's really a good person, but they don't make her like so perfect at everything. They don't make her so studious that it's obnoxious. She feels like a real person. And I have to give a lot of credit, not just to the writers, but I think the actors of this film really deserve a lot of credit. This is an interesting film because it is cast with a group of virtual unknowns. And in some cases, true unknowns. Like, did anybody recognize the names of those two actors? their IMDb pages are fairly scant. They're just starting out their careers. And even the supporting characters are, I don't know if, the European actors, they've probably done a lot of shows, but even so, just doing a quick scroll through there, it's not a lot. This is a film for the character actors. This is a film for the new performers to kind of get their foot in there and show what they can do, that they can carry a film. And I feel like these two young actors really took that challenge and made the most of it and did a really, really great job. I think they had excellent chemistry together. I felt like they never overplayed it. They found the strengths in their characters and were able to bring them out. And they make it a delightful film to watch. You want to watch these two characters either individually or especially together. That's an important thing with one of these films. We want the characters to get together. Even if they're not romantically linked, you want them to be in the same scene together because they work so well. I give them both a lot of credit, and I wish this film was a little bit more popular, I guess. I wish that more people knew about it, because I think this could have been, if not a star turn for these two, I think it could have at least turned some eyes towards them and maybe started getting them some more prominent roles. I will say right now, if they ever decide they're going to do a live-action Spider-Gwen movie, which please do a live-action Spider-Gwen movie, Rose Reed would not be a bad choice for that. She would not be a bad choice for Spider-Gwen. I would back that. So yeah. I think you also have to give a lot of praise to, again, all the supporting characters. They create a community here. Yes, it's a little hokey and it's a little too Mayberry. Everybody's too perfect. There's nothing wrong in this town. Everybody's just so, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Yeah, it's a little hokey. But it does present this wonderful environment and these wonderful characters. It feels rich and lived in. The family that Finley lives with, her host family, are just lovely characters. Then there's not really a lot about them. They're just kind of there, but they are just lovely characters played by lovely people that you just go, I just want to spend time in this little bed and breakfast. I just want to be here. The only interesting thing I would say is that in terms of casting and how casting is weird, when you're looking at the movie within the movie, which is again supposed to be a very Lord of the Rings meets Game of Thrones fantasy series, our man Beckett, Jedediah there, he's a little too skinny for the roles they have him playing. I did a quick bit of research on the books, and apparently in the book it's supposed to be a vampire movie, which that I could see him in, but these kind of like he's not hulking enough. He's not Kit Harington built. But minor. I think that may also be part of the joke. You also got to give the director a lot of credit. Again, a fairly unknown director, not a lot of credits, but I think it's a smart director that knows how to, let the camera and the story do the work. Don't feel like you have to leave an imprint or do a special shot or anything like that. Sometimes you just need the story to carry it. And I have no doubt that there is a lot of actor coaching going on for this. And I have no doubt that we owe the softness of the film to the director. The style, the look of it, it all goes back to a very understated creative eye. I don't know if this director, and again, I don't even know the director's name, I'm sorry about that. I don't know if this director would ever be heading up a Marvel film, but I think that there are some quiet, gentle movies that could use a skilled hand. People need that. That's a skill. Not everyone can do that. So yeah, it's a delightful, wonderful little film. There are negatives, of course. As I said, it is stock, and some of the stock characters aren't as well-rounded, particularly folks from the movie set. Of course, Beckett's father/manager is this, been managing his career since he was 7. I pushed him into show business. This is what he wants, and I'm spinning his personal life to whatever, blah, 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 blah. Very mustache twirly, a little too much, as is his co-star and on-again, off-again girlfriend and tabloid fodder partner there. They're a little too evil with no sense of redemption or anything like that. So, yeah, so in those instances, the stock characters don't really work. There's also a logic flaw I have to point out, or one that I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around. So the whole thing is that Beckett is starring in this series of highly successful fantasy films, right? He's the star. But the conflict for him is that the movie studio is offering him several spin-off movies of the same character. So here's my question. If you're the lead of a film, how do you have a spin-off? Okay, like, you can't spin James Bond off into another film series. It's still a Bond movie. Now, you can spin Black Widow off from the Avengers or something like that, but you can't really... How do you spin the main character off? Like, you can even understand it if you're looking at Game of Thrones or, Lord of the Rings, these things that have millions of characters, and you say, okay, we're going to just focus on one, and this movie is going to be all about, Samwise Gamgee or Jon Snow, and not about anybody else, but it's just their story. Okay, that I can understand as a spinoff, but if this guy is the lead, how is he doing a spinoff? I don't quite understand that. That's a me thing. That's my logic problem. I'll deal with it. I guess the only other thing, and I feel is something with it being a book first, is I feel like there are a lot of subplots, a lot of other things running through this film, and it can get a little cluttered at times. There's of course the love story, which is our main story. There is her trying to find her heart in her music and to not just play the notes, but play it with her heart. There's her with the old lady at the retirement home, played by Vanessa Redgrave, the biggest star power the film has. There is the story about her late brother left a journal with a bunch of paintings he did, and one of them is of this Celtic cross, which is missing a chunk out of it, and she's trying desperately to find the cross. So there's just a lot of things going on in this film. All of them do kind of come back and connect back to each other eventually, so I don't feel like I can honestly say these are superfluous plots, but there is just a lot of things happening, and I can't help but think at some points the film may have been a little better served if maybe some of these were streamlined a little bit. I don't know how you'd necessarily do that, and I try not to present a problem unless I can think of an adequate way to solve it, which I cannot do in this instance. So, so shut up, Brandon, essentially. But that's just the only really thing watching it that I had an issue with. But those are quibbles. Those are minor issues. For the most part, I just really enjoyed this movie. It was everything that you kind of was hoping a movie like this would be. Again, people can give Hallmark movies a lot of shit, and sometimes deservedly so. But there's a reason they exist. People like them. They're comfort food. They don't need to be, the in-depth woven plot. Sometimes you just need something a little goofy and cheery, and sometimes you just need a calm, sweet, lovely stream of a movie. That's how I kind of think about this movie. I compared Bagger Vance to that, too, that it's like a lazy river that you just kind of want to lay down in and just kind of let the current gently guide you along. It's the perfect movie for a rainy Sunday afternoon where you cuddle up with someone really close and wonderful in the Warren, and you sip some hot cocoa and you watch just a sweet little movie. I really enjoyed it. It was a lovely, lovely little cookie that, maybe it's not completely filling, but it just tastes so good. So that's my opinion. So final grade for Finding You, I'm going to B+ on this one. It loses some points because it is a bit stock, and there are times it's a little too perfect and wholesome, but it's beautiful to look at. The characters are lovely. The acting is very well done. Again, big ups to our two leads for the great work that they've done. And yeah, I hope more people find this film. I hope more people give it a chance. Don't think it's going to change your life, but it may just make a nice quiet afternoon a little bit more enjoyable. It's like a good book, So that's my opinion. I advise people to go check it out. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for always coming along for the drive home. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.